Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled Black Remembering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Black Remembering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Black Remembering podcast, where we highlight the heavy and the hope. As y'all know, tax season is upon us. And I don't know about y'all, but tax season and all things tax related brings up a lot of complex feelings for me. I don't understand taxes. I'm very ignorant about them. And most of my loved ones don't understand them either. And there seems to be this widespread barrier of knowledge that isn't necessarily offered in K through 12 schools or like for full credit in colleges. So for the next few months, the Black Appalachian Coalition would like to offer our listeners the Tea on Taxes series, where we will demystify taxes. The Tea on Taxes series focuses on honest conversations with real community members about their relationship with finances, economics, and taxes, followed by conversations with Black tax experts who are kind enough to offer their knowledge to our audience. This episode of the Tea on Taxes series welcomes a very special guest, Sonja Jones, powerhouse and founder of GIP Financials. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much, Nita. It's an honor. Thank you.
So here's a bit about Sonja Jones. She is a multifaceted expert, a seasoned expert in the realm of business, accounting, and funding, seamlessly weaving together her rich tapestry of experiences across various ventures. With a strategic focus on empowering entrepreneurs to amplify profits and secure funding, Sonja has become a prominent figure in the business landscape. She started her entrepreneurial journey with Bell Investments, a Memphis-based real estate investment company catering to nonprofit clients by providing both temporary and permanent housing in the Fraser area. She also founded Music Is Piano Academy and spent over 2 decades in education, with 12 of those years teaching elementary music before transitioning to school operations and financials from 2014 to 2023. In 2019, Sonja embarked on a new chapter with the establishment of GIP Financials, a dynamic firm specializing in bookkeeping and business finance consulting. Witnessing the financial challenges faced by many talented entrepreneurs, she aimed to fill the gap by providing crucial financial acumen through her firm. GIP Financials has since expanded its reach, serving clients across multiple states and collaborating with local nonprofits and coaches to impart fundamental business finance education to aspiring entrepreneurs. Sonja is a lifelong learner, and her education credentials include a bachelor's degree in music education from the University of Memphis, a master's degree in instructional design and technology from the University of Memphis, a certificate of education finance from Georgetown University, a certified county finance officer from University of Tennessee County Technical Assistance Service, and a certified QuickBooks Pro advisor. Thank you so much, Sonja, for coming onto the show. I like to start with a little soul scan check-in thing, kind of like an icebreaker, but I would love to know what has made you smile or laugh recently.
Oh, what has made me smile or laugh recently? Probably my 19-year-old son, Jaira. He called me, was it yesterday? It might have been yesterday. He attends Georgia State University. He was flirting with a young lady. And I guess they don't exchange phone numbers anymore. It's like, what's your Instagram? And the fact that he called me and told me about it, I was like, all right, I'm cool, mom.
I love it. I will wholeheartedly admit that I have no game, so I didn't even know that nowadays it's the whole Instagram thing. But I'm glad he called you. Um, I'd say for me, Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance show. Specifically, so it was my mom's birthday on Super Bowl Sunday, and we all sat down, her, my sister, and myself, and we watched that halftime performance. And they were in front of me, and I was kind of behind them, so I'm watching this performance, and I'm also watching their reactions, and it filled me with so much joy. So thank you so much. I love having that exchange with our guests. Well, I'm going to start with this. What does GIP stand for? And why are you passionate about demystifying taxes?
Gotcha. So GIP is an acronym for Get in Position. And the reason why we're so passionate about fundamental business finance education is because there are so many gurus out there on the internet and on social media that are giving out misinformation, whether they're doing it on purpose or by accident, because sometimes they can give you a little taste just for you to click, or put those captions on there just for you to clip, and they might not be giving you everything. There's just too much of that going on, and by the time they get to us, some of their issues are basically too expensive to fix, and we've just seen that way too many times. And we're just like, you know what? Somebody's going to have to be the answer to this problem. And so we are on the front lines, just educating, entrepreneurs. And like I said, we are down to the basics about, your monthly bookkeeping, the difference between bookkeeping and accounting. And we're just thinking of ways to continuously educate, through our social media platforms when we're, doing the podcast, things like that. So that's where our passion lies, because we're just, we don't want any more entrepreneurs to be discouraged. God gave them a vision to start a business, and then they end up getting discouraged because of all the financial roadblocks because they listen to the wrong people.
Thank you so much. That misinformation that you mentioned is a topic that's come up in some of our listening sessions. And I think that misinformation comes with a certain amount of fear.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, lean towards someone who's giving you this carrot on a string, then you might put all of your trust in them, and then they could lead you astray, and you could be worse off than you were before. So thank you for touching on that. My
Mm-hmm.
second nosy question. Did you always know that you wanted to be an accountant, or was that something you discovered along the way?
So I would definitely say when I was younger, my mom kind of groomed me to be, like I said, I'm a Gen Xer. It was either between doctor, lawyer. We watched the Cosby Show. How they went down. So I always kind of, especially in high school, I felt like my mom was right. I'm gonna go, through the law, through the law window. But my passion was in music, and so I ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Memphis with the marching band. And I just kind of took, the music block. Shout out to one of our music professors, Dr. James Golston. He was the professor of clarinet at the University of Memphis. And I'll never forget, that was the fall of 1997, our freshman semester. And it was quite a bunch of, us like Black, freshmen music educators. And he just sat us all down and was like, hey, because I think most of us, and not all of us, were music performance majors. And he said, this music performance environment is pretty cutthroat. It is really not, set up for us. So I would suggest that you can still do music performance, but major in music education so you can have something to fall back on. And so that's what I did. And for 12 years, I was a, music educator. I love teaching elementary school. In the city of Memphis, we focus on offshore pedagogy where it focuses on instrumental movement and singing. And around that time, I had my two boys. And right when I was transitioning out of my teaching and going into, admin, that's where I met my now husband. We got married. When I left my teaching job to go to my admin job, my former principal left there. He was called to build a charter school or set up a charter school. So I thought that I was going over there to teach music. Apparently, God had other plans. So, as you mentioned in the bio, I had a piano studio. We were investing in real estate in that same neighborhood where I taught at. And I thought at the time where God was, moving me to at least, do this, part-time, to leave my teaching job and to focus on the businesses each, part-time. And right around that time when that happened, my dad got sick because we were managing the properties as a family. He took ill. We ended up having to sell those properties. Right. So now I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do now? Then at a funeral, unfortunately, one of our coworkers passed away. And that's where I saw my former principal. He was like, come work for me part-time. I'm trying to build up this charter school. I was like, okay, gotcha. I can do some admin work, no big deal. And so from there, that's why I learned about, the charter school, grants and startup things, how to, bring in employees and things like that. And from there, he was like, do you want to be my operations manager? I was like, I thought I was doing music. He was like, no, I don't want anybody. You already know everything. Let's just keep it as it is. We can find another music teacher. And so I was like, okay. And so from there, that was 2013. The school started July 1st, 2014, and I never left that spot. So I was founding director of finance and operations. So that's how I came to be. So I had to learn everything from the ground up, honey.
Wow. Our founder, Bishop Marcia, often says that, and I'm going to butcher this, but the sentiment is that there's opportunity in the crisis. And you found this field. That connection literally came at a funeral. Like that's where you're in a space of mourning or celebration or both. And I think that's really beautiful. Just this new trajectory of your life finding you at this crossroads where it could have beaten you down. So, what makes GIP Financials stand out from the mainstream tax season corporations like TurboTax and H&R Block?
So what separates us is we are relatable and we are so strong on education. If nothing else, when you get with GIP Financials, honey, you want to know what's going on with your numbers. You're going to know why we're taking this approach to your taxes, why we're suggesting X, Y, and Z. That's what's going to separate us. To give you a little bit of story about how GIP Financials came to be. So I was at the charter school doing finance and ops. My boss at the time, he was, an educator for, at that time, over 30, 35 years. So when the charter school came to be, a lot of his former students had kids, grandkids, which started, our school. And then, of course, they were asked or letting him know, like, hey, I got a business. Can I help? Do you guys need painting? Do you guys need, treats, stuff like that? And so, of course, he was like, of course, we want to patronize, our local, our stakeholders who are also business owners, right? And no problem with that at all. Bring it on. So he would walk them to my office, would shake hands, do the key, as you say. And I have to let them know before, we give you payment, you have to complete this W-9. And that's when I learned that quite a bit of our businesses were built out of survival, out of hustling, right? Which is nothing wrong with that. It's just the fact when it comes to you wanting to get grants and do business like with schools and things like that, we get federal and state money. Every penny has to be accounted for, right? So we spend a lot of time explaining the why, because those business owners basically got offended that we asked them to fill out W-9s so they can report that income on their taxes. We couldn't pay them through PayPal, friends and family. We couldn't pay them through Cash App and things like that. A lot of our, business owners, we had to, especially the ones that we were using their services for, like, grant funding and things like that, where we had to submit a reimbursable grant. We had to show them how to create invoices. We had to suggest to them, hey, you might want to, if you want to continue working with us, open up a business checking account. Like, let's go and get an EIN, things like that. We noticed that we were doing that way too much. And that's when we were, thinking like, hey, where are the resources around here in Memphis? We knew we had, small business organizations and small business nonprofits that helped. We just didn't know to the extent. But what we noticed was nobody was really talking about the fundamentals, specifically bookkeeping. They were talking about the funding and grants and loans. Nobody was talking about the profit and loss. Nobody was talking about the balance sheet. Nobody was talking about cash flow, right? Or tax deductions and things like that. Tax returns, but not tax deductions. So that's when we decided, like, hey, what if we took this and started teaching entrepreneurs, right? Starting with, the small businesses that we knew of within the school, and then just branch it out, right? So that was December 17th, 2019, GIP Financials came to be. Little did we know, right? A couple months down the road, we were going to be in the pandemic, and the PPP loans and the EIDL situations were coming down the pike. So we started really evangelizing. That's the word I like to call it, evangelizing a lot of the business owners about what the PPP loan was, the forgivable part of it, things like that. Some of the entrepreneurs just went full throttle, was just doing any and everything with it, to the point like, dude, we can't help you. You too in too deep. You know, you had somebody apply for you, you don't even know what they put on your application and stuff like that. We can't help you with that, unfortunately, right? And then we also had on the other end, we had business owners that wanted to take it, but they were scared to do it because it was Fed money, right? So we had to do a lot of educating on that end. So especially with the entrepreneurs that we knew would not only qualify but get their loans forgiven, we really pushed them to be like, hey, this is going to be an opportunity for you to either get some, free money, as you can say, or to, take advantage of the EIDL loan. That's going to be some of the cheapest money, as far as interest rate and 30-year terms that we're going to have. It probably in my lifetime, at least, I'm 45. So with that, I'm happy to say that of the 7, entrepreneurs that trusted us to help them with their PPP loans, all 7 of them got their loans forgiven. And from there, I mean, it just kind of, took off. And so we just, did a whole lot of like YouTube videos, a lot of free workshops. And like I said, I can confidently say nobody's teaching fundamental business finance education like we are. Like we will literally handhold you through what you need to go through, to the point where we started an online community called GIP Academy. Because our small business owners need help. Nobody should be flying blind anymore when it comes to knowing your numbers. It's just too risky. So that's how we're serving our community.
Thank you. That relational part I think is really really important because there is a almost a hesitance. You mentioned not wanting to accept certain funds because it was federal. But like having that trust within your community and building those relationships with people is something that corporations don't care to do, have zero interest in, because they are genuinely trying to profit off of ignorance and not really caring about the individual. So,
Exactly.
what would you say are the top questions that your clients ask for help with?
Oh man, I think the top 3 I would say are grants, like funding, particularly like how can I get a grant? Can I get a grant for my business? Things like that. And the response to that would be any business can qualify for a grant, right? Because the purpose of a grant is for, organization or foundation to provide funds that's going to enhance the community in some way, shape, or form and stimulate the economy. That's the purpose, of a grant. Even if you're a startup business, there are particular grants out there. You just have to find them. Okay, so one of the websites that we've run across is called helloskip.com. And I'll give you the link to put in the show notes. So Hello Skip is kind of like, if you look at it, it's kind of like Credit Karma. It has that format like if you've ever been to Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, or something like that, and you put in your information and then they give you like the credit cards or the loans that you qualify for. Hello Skip is kind of the same way, to where you put in your business information. They also have a section called the Grant Vault, where they have like about maybe 10 questions that you can answer for your business. And through those questions, the way you respond, it helps them find grants that you may qualify for. So that's probably our biggest resource right now. But also, there are several nonprofit organizations and probably government, I probably say government organizations that you can find, grants and things for. But Hello Skip is probably going to be the one that's going to cater to, most of your audience. The second thing is going to be this. Folks want to ask about the S corp. Like, Sonja, I have a business. I heard on the internet that if I file my business as an S corp, it's going to save me a ton of money. So what we have to debunk quite a bit is to educate entrepreneurs that a S corp is not a business entity. It is a tax election. So what I mean by that is when the IRS taxes businesses, you're either going to be taxed as a sole proprietor, right? Meaning that whether you're a single member LLC or if you're just a business and you just got an EIN and a business license with your state, right? Sole proprietor, or you're going to be taxed as a corporation. Those are the two. And I'm just talking about the two that our audience are most familiar with, right? And if you're going to file as a corporation, you have to be making a significant amount of profit. That's the amount after your expenses have been taken out. We normally say between $50,000-$60,000. 50,000, we're kind of, borderline 60. That's when we probably need to be looking at, taking the S corp election. Why? Because a couple of reasons. The S corp tax election is going to require the business owner to be on payroll, and then you also have to be receiving what they call a reasonable salary. Now, they don't have anything concrete. It's just based off of what, your industry requires, right? But if you think about payroll just in itself, if you have to be on payroll, you have to have payroll software. That's going to cost you money. You have to register your business with your Department of Revenue if your state has income tax, and your state's Department of Labor because of unemployment tax. You have to do, federal tax reporting. All those things cost extra money. And the corporation tax return itself is expensive. You're going to probably be paying at least maybe between $800 to $1,000 for that tax return alone. And that's separate from your personal tax return, right? So a lot of people here on, on social media, like you get this S corp, you can put yourself on salary, meaning that you can just make up numbers and file them on your tax return. Absolutely not. And then another thing with that S corp, when you take that election with the IRS, you have to, for lack of a better term, apply for that. You have to be approved for that election. That's why you need to make sure that you have a real expert that's walking you through these things. And then the third thing people talk with us about is just how to organize their financials, right? Like, how do I get started? What do I need to do to make sure that the alphabet boys, the IRS, don't come for me? So we talk about your entity structure. If you're starting out in a business, just go get your EIN. Get your business license with your, local municipality. I know in the state of Tennessee, you can get your business license either from, from the county. Sometimes you may have to, depending on where you are, you get it from the city, right? Just start there. And then once your business grows to the point where you feel like you need, more protection, then you go get your LLC, right? From your respective Secretary of State, depending on where you stay. In the state of Tennessee, it's $300, right? $300, there ain't nothing to sneeze at, right? So you want to make sure that when you're doing that, that you're making yourself aware of what's required of you within that LLC. Sometimes If you get an LLC with your state, you might have to pay certain taxes with that LLC. So, like I said, it's important that you have an expert that can walk you through those specific things. So, in our tax prep checklist, that's our freebie that we have. We talk about the importance of checking with your Department of Revenue, checking with your Secretary of State to find out when I, get this business license, what taxes am I responsible for? If I file this LLC, what taxes am I responsible for? Because those things are going to be important because you don't want to be just, in your business rolling, doing your thing, and then all of a sudden you get bopped upside the head by a letter because you weren't aware of having to file a tax and then penalties and all the late fees and stuff start rolling in. It can be discouraging, right? So it's good to be, proactive and do those things ahead of time.
We love TikTok and we love YouTube University, but the cautionary tale is to not put all your eggs in one basket. Take that information and also go with a consultant and an expert who can guide you and hopefully not make those scary mistakes. The
Right.
alphabet boys knocking on your doors is the last thing you want. What barriers do you think exist currently in our society when it comes to education around financials and taxes?
Oh my goodness. I think the biggest one is just lack of information and visibility. I can speak for, Memphis for sure. And like I was telling you before, like when I was working at the charter school, and there was so many, entrepreneurs that just weren't aware of things. And I would say, especially for my city, that we are fairly resource heavy when it comes to things, but it's just the point that everybody is not aware of where these resources are. And my thing is like, how? How in the world is this not, these things aren't available? How are people not seeing these things? Right. And that's one of the reasons why for us at GIP, we do a lot of community outreach. We connect with like the Black Chamber of Memphis, the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce, Epicenter, a lot of the Building Memphis, Score CDC, those nonprofits that support entrepreneurs. And we get in front of them to say like, hey, let's do a workshop. Let's talk about, X, Y, and Z. So entrepreneurs can be aware, especially when it comes to like things like grants, right? I'm the bearer of bad news on a lot of occasions to be like, hey, I know you excited about these grants, but if you hadn't been tracking your numbers, there's no way the grantors are going to be able to say, do you have no street cred for us to invest in you? It's as simple as that. You know, we have a lot of programs in the city of Memphis where, like incubators and accelerators where they'll, give you, funding on the back end. But are they educating on what you should be doing with those funds? Because 9 times out of 10, most folks are just like, I done pay myself all this money. I'm just gonna put it back in my personal checking account. You got to have a strategy, when you're using those funds. So I think it's just really a lot of lack of information. Here's a perfect example. A lot of our small businesses that when they're making good money, they're not saving money for quarterly taxes. And then when it's time for you to file your taxes, you're so used to getting a refund that when you made all this money in your business, that money has to be, accounted for and your refund is eaten up. So we have to, again, be the bearer of bad news in a sense, because if you are an entrepreneur, the mindset of getting a refund really we got to get out of that mindset. Because if you are a business owner, you should be, prepared to pay taxes. As accountant and bookkeepers, we're here to help you reduce your tax liability to make sure that you're paying the least amount humanly possible. We're going to check those deductions. We're going to check those tax credits, things of that magnitude. So those are a lot of things that we have to kind of, realistically educate our entrepreneurs about, especially that mindset about that refund. We just got to go on, get on out of that.
That reminds me of one of our listening sessions. One of the speakers mentioned like she grew up with tax knowledge and accountants in her family. So I asked her, like, what is your mindset around taxes, around the refund? And she's like, I don't think about it as a refund. I think about it as something to, if I do get anything back, to sparse out over the next year or save it up for a trip, but I don't really depend on it or look forward to it. And that was a different perspective for me, because I've growing up, I've always like heard of tax season as like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a time of relief. This is a
Yeah.
almost like a second Christmas. So just
Right.
hearing that difference, and since speaking with you and our and another tax expert in the series, this is the first time I've heard about the concept of a tax plan or paying taxes quarterly. Like, it's in my mind, it's always been you have to pay it at the end of the year, or like start filing at the end of the year, and then you I, at one point I stopped getting getting anything back, and it's always been like owing. So it never occurred to me that you can make that blow less of a blow on yourself, or on your small business if you do it quarterly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it really helps out in the end. But a lot of times, if you don't have an expert to kind of walk you through that, because it paying quarterly taxes, it definitely softens the blow, if nothing else. Right. It's gonna soften the blow. And you brought up a good point as well, as far as like the whole how our community interprets the tax refund, right? Because we do, a lot of our community sees that as relief. But even if you do get a refund, let's think about how you can make that work for you in the long run.
So in conducting these listening sessions, I've found that discussing economics, finances, taxes, or anything around money and survival, it can be uncomfortable. It's brought up fear. And I was wondering what your approach is to helping clients find comfort in discussing these really hard topics.
It's a great question. First thing is, especially with our business owners, you got to meet them where they are. When we're doing coaching, we always start with wins. We always start with wins. If nothing else, you considered yourself enough to go out on faith and start a business, right? You heard God and said, you got a talent, baby. Let's go ahead and see what we can work with it. Use what's in your hand, right? If nothing else, the first couple years you're gonna have a loss. But at the end of the day, you started something that you didn't think you could do. A win is a win, right? That's what we start with first. And in the realm of entrepreneurship, social media again, because you see folks, out here, riding nice and all that good stuff, got the fresh gear on and all that, baby, that takes time. That takes time. And who's to say that they're not doing that just for advertising, just, for content creation? But entrepreneurship takes time. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a community, right? It's going to take you being humble, right, to do that. And I think those experiences also help us be more empathetic, you know, to who we're dealing with, whether it's an entrepreneur or even when we're just talking about budgeting. You know what I'm saying? And just having somebody to go through things with you line for line. One of the things that we do when we talk, to our prospective clients, we disclose to them like, hey, we're going to be asking you a lot of questions. And that's just the purpose of, it's very much like when you go to the doctor, right? Sometimes you have to remove some garments, figure out what's going on, right? So you have to expose yourself, but just know that you're in a safe space. That's our job to do. It's our job to create the safe space for the clients, to make sure that they understand whatever you tell us is not going anywhere. You ain't got to make sure that we ain't finna just sit up here and put you on blast on social media, nothing like that. We don't do that. You have to just be aware of, what's going on within your community, what's going on trending wise in social media. And then also just knowing that, they talk about the phrase, we listen and we don't judge. But I mean, you got to be like that for real. Those experts kind of make it seem like, well, if you don't know this, you ain't squat, blah, 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 and make people feel really small, to the point to where, well, I guess they know what they're talking about. They using all these words I ain't never heard of in my life. So I'm gonna give them all this money, and then you don't have anything to show for it. And they're not there to help you go through, all the stuff that you have to fight through. So we got to be very, very, very aware that when we're dealing with clients, we are dealing with, you know, God's assignments in the earth. And we don't want that on our hands. We want to make sure that we are giving people the tools that they need to be poured into so they can be empowered. That's our mission statement, to empower entrepreneurs to know their numbers and position their businesses for maximum impact. You can't do that without a team that you can trust.
Would you please leave our audience with a little nugget of wisdom? Any advice or affirmations you'd like to share are welcome.
Sure. One of the things that we tell our entrepreneurs is that you are not your numbers, right? Because we talked about the whole emotional part of it when it comes to like shame and stuff. Our prospective clients will come to us like, "Oh, Miss Sonya, I screwed up so much. I done did this, I done did that. Don't look at my reports. Oh, it's horrible," stuff like that. Like, we're not doing that today. Nope. You are not your numbers. If you're running a business, those numbers are only going to reflect the performance of your business. That does not reflect you as a human being. Do you know how many folks out here done started businesses and done flopped and got right back up again and started another business? Right? That's how you gonna grow. You can plan all you want to, like I did, and still, like I said, life boop, thump you on that nose, and things can happen. But at the end of the day, we still got to move forward. We got to put a plan in place. That's why it's safety and wise counsel. Make sure you got some wise counsel around you, right? That will also, hold you accountable to say, feel how you feel. I'm give you 5 minutes to vent. We good? White face. What we gonna do? Let's put a strategy together. What you need? What's the priorities? How can we be of a support? Right? So you are not your numbers. That's the best thing. That's the advice I'll tell anybody, whether you're dealing with your job numbers, right? Your business numbers, or even if you're trying to attain a particular goal, right? Because life's gonna life, but it's all about the pivot and how we, take advantage of the pivot, right? So don't be afraid to go get it, y'all.
That is so good. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to have met. You have a light in you, and I appreciate you for sharing it. And for those of you who are listening, please keep up with Sonja Jones and GIP Financial by visiting GIP Financial's website, following GIP Financials on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. We will make sure all of those links are available to y'all in our show notes, and we will hear more from Sonja Jones later on in the Tea on Taxes series. Please tune in for more information and advice on demystifying taxes. If you listen to this episode and you did not take notes, I strongly advise that you hit that rewind button, go to the very beginning, get your notepad out, and make sure you are taking note of this very wonderful information. Go ahead and share this good news with your community. Until next time, peace and blessings, y'all.